Hi, and welcome back to another video. In this video, we will be taking a look at one of the most significant historic discoveries that happened during the 19th century, an event titled the California Gold Rush. So, if you're thinking from the name California Gold Rush that this historic discovery has got something to do with gold, then you are absolutely right. It all started on January 24th of 1848 in Coloma, California, where a carpenter named James Wilson Marshall discovered flakes of shiny gold in a stream bed situated along the American River. As a worker at Sutter's Mill, James told his boss John Sutter, and both confirmed that they literally struck gold. It was not long later that information was broken through their agreed secrecy, making this the start of one of the most significant events of the 19th century. When reading in the newspapers about large quantities of gold found at the sawmill, many people were skeptical and did not believe the notion. That is not until an entrepreneur called Sam Brannan announced pretty joyfully through the town whilst waving a vial containing proof of the precious metals. This, with the influence of the government, triggered a gold fever nationwide, resulting in empty stores and thousands of fortune seekers coming from near and far places such as Sandwich Islands and even Asia, Latin America, Europe and Australia too. Migrants far and wide only had one goal in mind, which was to find this precious gold. These prospectors were fueled by this golden concept of wealth, that the sooner a man could get to the gold fields, the sooner he'd be rich. In a society where it was highly based on wage labor, the promise of wealth forever altered the life expectations of hundreds of thousands of people, and most of them were men. During that prospective phase, these men were referred to as 49ers, and a surge of them paved their destinies into searching for gold. And throughout 1849, the gold miners' lives mainly consisted of spending life savings just to make the arduous journey to California, flooding the numbers of California in 1849 and the decade that followed. This itinerant rabble of gold rushers was an excitable bunch encompassing Cornish tin miners, Scottish crofters, Irish labourers, Chinese fishermen, Chilean farmers, Australian clerks, emancipated African heritage slaves, Mexican soldiers, German blacksmiths, Italian aristocrats, and American authors. All with different languages and accents, but all with one thing on their mind: gold. If you're wondering if there were any women gold seekers, well, it was stated that only 10% of the people who went to California for the gold rush were indeed women. But the vast majority of women stayed in their hometowns to take on new responsibilities such as running farms or businesses and caring for their children alone. The 49ers numbered about 300,000, traveling overland across mountains or by sea, arriving in covered wagons or ships. Already by 1849, San Francisco had been transformed into a chaotic city of 40,000 with 4,000 immigrants arriving by ship each month. And by the mid-1850s, more than 300,000 people had poured into California. The gold rush had a profound impact on California as it dramatically changed the demographic numbers from 12,000 when the gold rush began to the state's population of 380,000 by the end of the decade. As this massive migration to California transformed the population numbers, it also changed the landscape. To accommodate the needs of the 49ers, the construction of gold mining towns was built all over the region. So at the time, California had a few established cities complete with shops, saloons, brothels, and other businesses seeking to make their own gold rush fortune. A historian, Malcolm Rober, notes, the California Gold Rush was the decisive influence in bringing together the East with the newly acquired western extensions of the American Empire, especially California. In other words, the Gold Rush didn't separate the nation by creating an East and a West. It united the nation by bringing the West into the rest of the nation. Upon arrival in California, immigrants learned mining was the hardest kind of labor. They moved rocks, dug dirt, and waded into freezing streams. They lost fingernails, got sick, and suffered from malnutrition. As for California's native people, 120,000 Native Americans died of disease, starvation, and homicide during the gold rush. In addition, the conditions of these cities to accommodate these miners were often primitive and dangerous, as makeshift mining camps and towns soon became overcrowded and lawless. When the gold rush started, California was not yet a secure state that was under a legal system, so residents developed their own codes of conduct as law enforcement was virtually non-existent in these pop-up towns and cities. Disputes were often settled personally or by groups of miners. Unfortunately, that isn't enough to stop crime rates from increasing in the crowded goldfields. Anglo-American miners became increasingly territorial over the land and natural resources they viewed as meant for them, and so their competition forced other nationalities from the mines with violent tactics as xenophobia and racial prejudice ran rampant. Also, as agriculture and ranching expanded to meet the needs of the hundreds of thousands of new settlers, white settlers' violence toward Native Americans intensified. The lack of housing, sanitation, and law enforcement in the mining camps and surrounding areas created a dangerous mix. It would be clear to say that life as a 49er could be brutal. As there was less and less gold to go around due to increasing crowdedness, striking it rich required good luck, and the fortunate bettered their circumstances. Individual miners found their dreams of cashing in on the gold rush growing more elusive. Furthermore, the growing industrialization of mining drove more and more miners from independence into wage labor as the methods of finding gold evolved over time. Early efforts usually involved panning to separate the heavy gold from lighter rocks and dirt, but it was soon replaced by placer mining, which was later then replaced by hydraulic mining, which began in 1853. This is where miners used high-pressure hoses to wash soil and rocks over sluices. Gold diggers simply could not compete with the level of resources and technological sophistication of the major mining companies. $170 million in gold was extracted between 1860 and 1880 through these highly successful mining techniques. Though in the process, they devastated landscapes and choked the rivers with sediments that washed downstream and flooded farmlands, ruining crops. Fortunately, a court ruling brought an end to hydraulic mining in 1884, and in turn, agriculture took over as the principal force behind the California economy. Ultimately, settlements that lacked other viable economic activities soon became ghost towns after gold was exhausted. And though the California gold rush had a transformative effect on the landscape and population, it peaked in 1852, and by the end of the decade, it was all over.